This is going to be our second live build of a model kit. Don't go away. Hey everybody, it's Paul from Fat Guy Productions coming to you as always from beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. And today we're going to be busting into the ICM Model T fire truck. Gotta love this. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get right to it.
Hello YouTubers, it's Model Building Day. Today we're going to be building the 1914 Model T fire truck by ICM in 1/24th scale. I've never built an ICM kit before, so this should be a lot of fun. Although I did a first look video not too long ago, I'm going to look at the parts and the instructions very carefully. I've never built an ICM kit before, and I want to make sure I have some kind of an understanding of what I'm getting myself into here. Now that I've taken a close look at everything, I'm ready to get building. I'll begin by removing the parts with sharp side cutters. I love this pair from Tamiya. One time I tried cutting all the parts out of the sprues all at the same time, and that was a huge mistake. Don't do it. It gets too confusing. Cut the parts off the sprues as you need them. I'll go over all the parts very carefully with my razor knife. I'll remove any nubs from the sprues. I'll look for any flash, ejector marks, seams, or any other things that I need to get rid of before gluing things together. After fitting the parts together carefully and making sure the seams are aligned, I'll glue everything together using Tamiya extra thin cement. This stuff is great. You just dab it to the seam line and capillary action will pull it through the part. After assembly, I can go ahead and paint the engine with some semi-black paint. Here I'm about to dry brush it with some silver. This will bring out some of the details, raise some of the relief, and give the motor a very realistic look. Now for some details. Here I'm going to use some lead wire bent to shape, and I'm going to super glue it into place to simulate a fuel line. And to kind of wrap things up, I'll do some detail painting. Like here on the fan belt. It seemed like a lot of the times these older fan belts were this reddish hue, and so that's what I'm going to paint here. Now I can start assembly of the major body components. The parts go together simply, they have a lot of detail, and it's going to look really nice. After fitting everything together, I'll just glue it with some of my Tamiya extra thin cement. I have a lot of different kinds of glues and adhesives in my arsenal, and if I use something different, I'll be sure to let you know what I'm using and why I'm using it. But for now, I'm just going to use capillary action and Tamiya extra thin cement. Now I can turn my attention to the fire suppression elements of this kit. Here are the chemical tanks. There's also a lot of plumbing and hose and stuff like that, things that firefighters would need to put out a fire. Just a word of warning, This is a fairly delicate kit, and if you have big old ham fingers like I do, it can be a little bit difficult. Remember, this is a 1/24th scale model of a 1914 Model T. It wasn't a big vehicle, and at 1/24th scale, it has a lot of very tiny parts. I don't always build everything in the order the directions say to, and here you can see why. I really like to get as much of a sub-assembly put together as possible before going to paint. You can see here I'm painting the body, and the point is to have one nice, even, unified paint job. By working out of order, I can sometimes get things together so I can paint them all in one pass. I rarely paint parts on the sprues, but the way these wheels were mounted, it was begging to be done this way, and it made it very convenient. Now that I have a nice paint job on the fire truck, I'm going to go ahead and put a coat of Pledge floor care on to protect what I've done so far and prepare the vehicle for the work I'm going to do later. Pledge comes out of the bottle ready to airbrush, and you lay it down like any other clear coat. I like to put a nice tack coat down first, then a medium coat, and then a nice wet coat. I do love to paint as much as possible all in one pass, but if I had installed the fire suppression system before painting, it would have been really difficult to paint. So I left it out and I'm painting it separately. While I'm over at the paint booth, I'll also paint the brass parts. I'm using AK Interactive's Xtreme metals to paint the brass. After laying down a gloss black base coat, I can begin to lay down the brass paint in very thin layers until I get the look I'm going for. This stuff is actually very good looking and more resilient than some of the other products out there. Now it's time for some more assembly. Using my side cutters, I'll go ahead and remove the wheels from the sprues, and I can start putting all of that together and attaching them to the vehicle. As I noted in my first look video, the tires are molded in white and not a pristine white. I think they could have been a little darker, but these aren't terrible. I'll pop the rubber tires onto the wheels, and then I'll do a little weathering. I'm going to brush on some red brick weathering powder from MIG. To do this, I'll use a foam-tipped brush, and I'll just kind of rub the powder onto the tread area of the tire. Last night I went ahead and attached the rear wheels and let them set up and dry. Today I'm going to put on the front wheels. Here you see I'm using Revell Contacta as my cement. Why am I using Revell Contacta? Well, it's a little bit more like the traditional Testors glue in the tube that we all remember. It's going to stay put, it has a little bit of grip to it, and it has a little longer open time, so I can make sure I get both wheels on and line them up before it will start to dry. Once both of the front wheels are on, I'll go ahead and set the model down on my desk and line up the wheels. Once they're lined up, I'm just going to let this thing sit and dry overnight. Now it's time to paint a bunch of the small parts. To help me do this, I'm going to use these cool little paint things from Hobby Zone. I'll just go ahead and clip all the small parts into these alligator clips and paint away. There's no need to be afraid of brush painting. While I prefer the Tamiya acrylic paints, you can use almost any acrylic paints out there. The real trick is to thin them down a bit with water. Not too much, just a little, and it will help the paint flow out beautifully. Okay, painting this seat wasn't such a problem, but now that I want to apply a nice weathering wash without putting a big thumbprint in the middle of it, I have to figure out a better way to hold it. I'm going to go and clip off a piece of extra sprue, snip off a nice square flat edge, and I'm just going to glue this sucker right to the back of the seat. This will provide me a beautiful little handle so that I can apply my wash and not have to worry about touching any of the visible parts. When I'm done and it's nice and dry, my side cutters will make short work of it. So how nice is that? I found some fine wire that seemed to be about the right gauge for making spark plug wires for this tiny little motor. So I cut 4 of them out, and I'm going to use some crazy glue or cyanoacrylate to glue these to the spark plugs on the top of the head. Alright, I've dropped the extinguishing package into the back of the Model T. It really lined up pretty well. I was very happy with that. And since it's sitting in there so nicely, I might as well go ahead and glue it in. I'll go ahead and use just a little bit of my Tamiya thin and put a dab of it at each connection point and then let it sit to dry. And now that the extinguishing system is nice and dry, I can go ahead and drop in the equipment basket. Same thing, I'll just kind of drop it in. It seems like it went right into place, fit beautifully. And now I'll just dab the connections with some of my Tamiya extra thin cement. I had to scratch build the connection point for the spark plug wires. So here I'm going to use a little bit of Contacta, and I'm going to glue it where it belongs, which is on the firewall. I'm using the Contacta to try and help this piece stay in place while the glue dries. Now is as good a time as any to go ahead and work on a bunch of this stuff for the undercarriage. I painted most of this stuff while it was still on the sprues. Now I'll go ahead and remove it and glue it into place. A lot of the pieces for the undercarriage, like the tie rod and pitman arm, were really delicate. It's really imperative you move slowly here. I won't be gluing the engine covers on, but now's as good a time as any to make sure everything's going to fit right and look good. Now we can go ahead and start adding in some of the firefighting equipment like extinguishers. For this, I'm just going to use a little bit of my Revell Contacta, put a little drop on the bottom of each piece, and set it down onto the sideboards. I love how the brass against the red of the body really make this thing come to life. I'm going to go ahead and paint the floor mat now, but I don't trust myself enough to go ahead and try and just brush it freehand. So I'm going to bust out my Tamiya masking tape, and I'm going to tape off the floorboard before painting it flat black. With everything masked off, I'll break out the Tamiya flat black paint and a nice little brush. I'll thin it down a bit and just kind of brush it in there. Don't leave the tape on any longer than you need to. I pretty much just waited until I was done cleaning up the brush and putting away the paint, and then I went ahead and started removing the tape. In this instance, I probably shouldn't have thinned the paint at all. I had it too thin, and I had it run underneath the tape just a little bit. It's not the end of the world because it cleans up pretty easily with a toothpick and a Q-tip, but it's extra work I didn't need. Okay, remember our seat? There she is. The wash is all nice and dry. I think it looks great. All I've got to do is kind of clip off the post I glued on there and glue it into the fire truck. Because everything is pretty much painted, I'm going to go ahead and use some thick cyanoacrylate here to glue the seat down. Remember the Pledge floor care we sprayed on the model? Well, that's going to help us right here. It's an acrylic finish that's going to protect the paint underneath and help us with our pin wash. The pin wash will flow through seams quicker and easier, and any part that we get where we don't want it, we'll be able to clean it up very easily with a Q-tip and a little enamel thinner. When doing the cleanup, don't have your Q-tip dripping with the enamel thinner. Just damp, and use a light hand. It doesn't take much, and you don't want to rub right through the acrylic and ruin your paint underneath. There's not a lot of clear parts for this vehicle, but there are some, and just like anything else, we'll remove them from the sprues using our side cutters. Here I'm going to glue the lens into the spotlight using this Testors glue for clear parts. That way it won't make a mess in case I'm a little off the mark. I'll open it up and put a very thin bead around the edge of the spotlight and then just drop the lens in. painted the ladders brown and gave them some wood grain highlights using a lighter shade of brown. After the paint was dry, I used some Tamiya clear to give them a nice, shiny, varnished look. Here I am applying a little Tamiya masking tape to the ends so that I can brush paint the red ends on the ladders. Having learned my lesson from the floor mats, and this being a fairly small amount of painting, I'm not going to thin this red paint as I paint the ends of the ladders. Now we can do some of the detail work, like putting in the headlights. And here I'm going to install the steering wheel. A little drop of cement to the steering box, and then I'll run the steering wheel right through the dash. I used a lot of this engine oil on the motor, assuming that a 1914 Model T probably leaked like a sieve. I thought it might be great to put some around the spindles on the wheels. I have to assume those probably leaked pretty good too. Now, with a toothpick dipped into some Tamiya silver, I'm going to apply some chip marks. Firefighters are notorious for taking care of their vehicles, but let's be honest, a vehicle in 1914, it probably took a pretty good beating. I'm trying very hard not to overdo this, and I'm just simply thinking about where would the chips be? Perhaps where the crew got in and out, where they leaned over the fender to open the hood, stuff like that. So that's where I'll put my chips. And here you have the finished product. I think it came out pretty good. This kit was a lot of fun for me, and for me it was a pretty good challenge because I do have bigger hands and it is a very delicate kit.
Well, there you have it, the 1914 Model T fire truck. I think it came out amazing. I'm super happy with it, and you're going to see this sucker again because I'm going to do a diorama, just a simple little street scene, but it should be a lot of fun. Okay, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and click subscribe. Ask any questions, make any comments that you might have. I love hearing from you and talking with you guys. Okay, I'm going to get out of here. Until next time, have an amazing day and be good.